She bled for 7 months in silence. He walked out while she was dying on the birthing table. Now the Alpha King wants his heir. But Maltida is done being invisible. And she's building an army of women he never bothered to see. And the Circle of Silent Moons is about to shake his throne to its foundations. Let's begin. The first time Maltida bled, she was alone. It happened in the cold, sterile hallway outside the Alpha King's war room. One moment she was clutching the ornate stone wall for balance, the heavy swell of her 7-month pregnancy pressing against her spine. The next, a sharp, tearing cramp lanced through her abdomen. She looked down. A thin trickle of crimson ran down her bare ankle. She didn't scream. She had learned, over the long, silent months of her mating, that screaming brought no one. Across the heavy oak doors, she could hear him. Alpha King Thomas, her mate. His voice was a low, commanding thunder as he addressed his generals. They spoke of border disputes, of rogues in the Eastern Pass, of alliances sealed with iron and blood. Not once, in the 7 months since she had told him about the pup growing inside her, he had not asked how she was feeling. She remembered the day she told him. She had been nervous, almost giddy, a foolish remnant of the girl she'd been before the moon ceremony. She'd found him in his study, sharpening a ceremonial dagger. "Thomas," she'd whispered, placing a hand over her still flat stomach. "We're going to have a pup." He had not looked up. The whetstone scraped against the blade with a sound like breaking bones. "See the physician. Ensure it is strong." Not "how are you?" Not "I will be there." Just a cold command, as if she were a broodmare and the pup a prospective sword. That had been the last real conversation they had. Now, as Maltida slumped against the wall, the blood pooling at her feet, a passing servant girl named Gracie found her. Gracie was young, with wide brown eyes and shaking hands. She didn't ask permission. She simply took charge, wrapping a woolen shawl around Maltida's shoulders and half carrying her toward the medical wing. "The king should know," Gracie whispered, her voice trembling. "You're his Luna. The pup is his heir." "He is in a war council," Maltida said, her voice hollow. "Nothing bleeds louder than politics." The labor was brutal. For 30 hours, Maltida lay on a cot in the cramped infirmary, the castle physician, an old, grim-faced wolf named Lionel, doing his best. Lionel was kind, in the way that battlefield surgeons are kind. Efficient, quiet, and honest to the point of cruelty. "The pup is breech, my Luna," he said, wiping his hands on a bloodied rag. "And you are too small. The birthing canal will not. It will be difficult." "Save the pup," Maltida said without hesitation. Lionel's eyes flickered. "That is not your decision alone." "The Alpha King will make it so," she whispered. And he did. When Thomas finally appeared, 2 hours after the first real contraction, summoned not by love but by protocol, he did not touch her. He stood at the foot of the cot, his massive frame blocking the lantern light, his face carved from granite. He looked at the blood-soaked sheets. He looked at Lionel. He looked at the tiny, struggling heartbeat on the enchanted monitoring stone. Then he looked at Maltida. "The pup," he said. It was not a question. "The pup is male," Lionel reported, "and strong. But the Luna has lost too much blood. If I intervene to save her, there is a chance." "I did not ask for chances," Thomas cut him off. His voice was the voice of a king. Absolute. Final. "I asked for the pup." Maltida heard the words through a fog of pain and exhaustion. She had expected them, had prepared for them even. But hearing it aloud, hearing her life weighed against that of her unborn child and found wanting, was a different kind of wound. Deeper than any blade. She turned her head on the sweat-soaked pillow. Her eyes met Thomas's. In them, she showed him everything. The first time she saw him at the ceremony and felt the bond snap into place like a steel trap. The hopeful meals she had prepared that went cold on his desk. The nights she had lain awake, listening to the empty space beside her in the royal bed. The quiet, crushing loneliness of being mated to a ghost. He stared back. His expression did not change. "Do it," he commanded Lionel. Then he turned and walked out of the room. The last thing Maltida saw before the world went dark was the heavy oak door swinging shut, sealing her fate on the other side. When she woke, it was to silence, not the gentle silence of recovery. The heavy, suffocating silence of aftermath. Her body felt wrong, hollowed out, gutted. A deep phantom ache pulsed where her belly had been. Gracie was there, on tears streaming down her round cheeks. In her arms was a small, bundled cloth. From within came a thin, reedy cry. "A boy," Gracie whispered, holding the bundle closer. "A perfect boy. He has your eyes, my Luna." Maltida tried to lift her arms. She couldn't. The blood loss had left her weak as a day-old fawn. "Thomas," she breathed. Gracie's face crumpled. "He has named the pup Theo, and he is already planning the heir's presentation to the court." "And me?" The young servant looked down. "He asked the physician if you would live. When Lionel said it was uncertain, the king said, he said to inform him when you either recovered or died. He has not visited." Maltida closed her eyes. The tears came then, silent, hot, and useless. She had given him a son. She had bled on the birthing table. She had been willing to die so that his heir would live. And he had walked out. In the quiet of the infirmary, with the tiny cry of her newborn pup filling the space where her husband's love should have been, Maltida made a vow. She would survive. Not for Thomas, not for the crown, but for the small, squirming life in Gracie's arms. And one day, the Alpha King would learn that ignoring a mate came with a price far greater than any war. For 3 weeks after the birth, Maltida existed in a gray haze. She did not heal so much as endure. The days blurred into one another. The same white ceiling, the same smell of bitter herbs and old blood, the same soft footsteps of Gracie moving through the infirmary. Lionel came twice a day to change her bandages and check the stitches that ran from her navel to her pelvis. He spoke in short, clinical sentences. "The hemorrhage has stopped. Your body is weak. You must eat." He never called her by name. Sometimes he called her Luna, but mostly he called her the patient. Once she asked him if she would ever be able to carry another pup. Lionel had paused, his weathered hands hovering over her abdomen. "The scarring is significant," he said finally. "It would be unwise. Another pregnancy would likely kill you." Maltida had nodded. She wasn't sure if she felt relief or grief. Perhaps both. Perhaps neither. She was too tired to untangle the knot in her chest. Gracie was the one who kept her alive. The young servant came before dawn and stayed past midnight, feeding her broth, propping her up on pillows, changing the linens when Maltida's night sweats soaked through. Gracie brought the pup, Theo, to her breast every 2 hours, settling the tiny bundle against Maltida's chest with gentle, practiced hands. Maltida would lie in the narrow cot, staring at the ceiling, while the small mouth latched on. She counted his fingers. 10. She counted his toes. 10. She memorized the soft, downy fuzz on his head, the way his nose scrunched when he was frustrated, the tiny crease in his left ear that she suspected came from her own bloodline. She did not name him. Thomas had already done that. At night, when Gracie dozed in the chair beside her cot and the castle fell silent, Maltida would whisper to the pup. "You are mine," she would say, her lips brushing his forehead. "No matter what he says, no matter what anyone says, you are mine first, and a prince second. The pup would blink up at her with those milky newborn eyes, and for a moment, Maltida felt something other than emptiness. On the 21st day, Lionel declared her well enough to leave the infirmary. "The king requests your presence in the nursery this evening," he said, not looking at her. He was washing his instruments in a basin of steaming water, his back deliberately turned. "For the official presentation of the heir, the court will be in attendance." Requests, as if she had a choice, as if she were a guest in her own home, rather than the Luna of the realm. "And if I am too weak to attend?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. Lionel paused. He turned then, and for the first time in 3 weeks, he looked her directly in the eye. There was something there. Not quite kindness, but not cruelty either. An old wolf's weariness. "Then the king will present the heir alone," he said quietly, "and no one will ask where you are, my Luna. That is the truth of it." Maltida absorbed this. She filed it away in the growing catalogue of truths she was collecting about her mate, about this castle, about the life she had been thrown into. "Then I will attend," she said. "Help me stand." Gracie helped her into a loose gray dress that hung on her diminished frame. The gown had been beautiful once, soft wool, on silver embroidery along the sleeves, but now it sagged at the shoulders and pooled around her hips. Maltida looked at herself in the small, tarnished mirror that hung on the infirmary wall. The woman staring back was a stranger. Hollow cheeks, bruised shadows under her eyes, hair that had lost its luster, hanging in dull, tangled strands. Her collarbones stood out like blades beneath her pale skin. She looked like a ghost who hadn't yet realized she was dead. "You are beautiful, my Luna," Gracie whispered, but her voice wavered at the end, cracking like thin ice. "I am invisible," Maltida corrected gently. She reached up and touched her own reflection. "There is a difference. Beauty can be seen. Invisibility is a choice others make for you." Gracie's lower lip trembled, but she said nothing. She only tightened the silver belt at Maltida's waist, the only part of the dress that still fit properly, and stepped back. "The nursery," Gracie said. "Shall I carry the pup?" "No." Maltida bent slowly, carefully, and lifted Theo from the bassinet beside her cot. He was so light. Too light, she thought. She needed to eat more, to produce more milk. She needed to get stronger. "I will carry him. He needs to know my scent, my heartbeat. He needs to know that one person in this castle will never let him go." She walked toward the door. Each step sent a small, sharp ache through her pelvis. The stitches pulled. Her legs trembled. But she did not stop. She did not lean on the wall. She held her son against her chest and walked. The nursery was at the far end of the east wing, a suite of rooms Maltida had decorated herself during the early months of her pregnancy. She remembered those days with a strange, distant tenderness, back when she still believed Thomas might one day walk through the door and see her. Back when hope had been a poison she drank willingly, convinced it was medicine. She had painted the walls a soft cream, the color of morning light through fog. She had sewn little wolves into the curtains, each one different, each one with a tiny silver thread for a heart. She had carved a cradle with her own hands, her wolf's strength guiding the chisel, her fingers bleeding onto the wood as she shaped the curved sides and the little wolves that danced along the base. She had whispered songs to the empty cradle, imagining the pup who would sleep inside it. Now, as she entered, she saw that everything had been changed. The cream walls were gone, replaced with dark oak paneling and the royal crest, a snarling wolf's head in gold leaf, repeated on every surface. The soft curtains had been torn down, replaced with heavy velvet the color of dried blood, so thick that they blocked out the moonlight. The cradle she had carved was shoved into a corner, empty and gathering dust, a forgotten relic. In its place stood an enormous iron crib, cold and ornate, like a cage for a tiny prisoner. The bars were etched with battle scenes. Wolves killing wolves, blood spilling into snow. This was not a nursery. This was a war room for an infant. And there, standing beside the crib with his back to her, was Thomas. He looked exactly as she remembered. Broad shoulders straining against a dark tunic. Dark hair cropped short, revealing the sharp line of his jaw. The weight of a crown he never took off, even indoors, even in private, even, she suspected, in his dreams. When he turned, his face was the same impassive mask she had seen in the infirmary. The same mask she had seen on their mating night, when he had taken her without a word and left before dawn, leaving her alone in a bed that smelled like a stranger. Behind him, arranged in a semicircle, stood a dozen members of the court. Generals with gray in their beards. Noblewomen in silk gowns, their eyes sharp and assessing. Lionel stood near the back, his hands clasped behind him. And at Thomas's right hand, a woman Maltida had never seen before. Tall, blonde, beautiful, dressed in a gown of deep green that matched her eyes. The woman was smiling. It was not a kind smile. "Maltida," Thomas said. Her name in his mouth sounded like a formality, like reading a name off a ledger, like a guard announcing a visitor who had overstayed their welcome. "Alpha King," she replied. She did not curtsy. She did not have the strength, and more importantly, she had decided she would never curtsy to him again. Not after the infirmary. Not after he had walked out while she was dying. His eyes swept over her. The gray dress, the hollow cheeks, the way she leaned against the doorframe for support. The way she clutched Theo to her chest like a shield. If he felt anything, he did not show it. His face was a wall, and she had stopped trying to climb it. "You have recovered," he said. It was not a question. It was an assessment. A report from Lionel, delivered without concern. The patient is mobile. The patient can stand. And the patient is no longer your problem. "Sufficiently," she said. The blonde woman beside Thomas laughed, a soft, musical sound, like wind chimes in a storm. "How brave," she murmured, loud enough for the court to hear. "The Luna walks. Shall we throw a celebration?" A few of the nobles chuckled. Maltida felt her cheeks warm, but she did not look away from Thomas. She held his gaze. Let him see her. Let him see what he had done. "Who is this?" Maltida asked, nodding toward the blonde woman. Thomas's jaw tightened. "Lady Vera, my diplomatic advisor." Advisor. Maltida knew what that meant. She had grown up in a pack, had watched her own father take advisors to his bed while her mother pretended not to notice. The woman's scent, expensive perfume and something else, something smug, confirmed it. "I see," Maltida said. And does your advisor have a role in this presentation?" "Lady Vera will stand as the pup's godmother," Thomas said. "A symbolic position. Nothing more." Theo stirred in Maltida's arms, letting out a small, unhappy whimper. She bounced him gently, instinctively, her cheek pressed to his downy head. "A godmother," she repeated, "chosen without consulting the mother." "It is my right as king," Thomas said. "It is your arrogance," Maltida replied, her voice low and even. "But very well. Let the court see. Let them see who stands beside the heir." She walked into the room. Every eye followed her. She felt their gazes like small, sharp knives, assessing her thinness, her pallor, the way her dress hung wrong. She heard the whispers. Too weak. Too quiet. She won't last the winter. She ignored them. She stopped in front of the iron crib. She looked down at the cold, ornate bars, the battle scenes, the absence of anything soft or warm. Then she looked at Thomas. "This is not a nursery," she said quietly. "This is a tomb dressed up as a throne." The room went silent. Someone gasped. The blonde woman, Vera, arched a perfect eyebrow. Thomas stepped closer. His presence was overwhelming. The sheer size of him, the weight of his power, the alpha command that pressed against her wolf and demanded submission. "You forget yourself," he said, his voice dangerously soft. "No," Maltida said. "I remember myself. I remembered myself on that birthing table when you chose the pup over me. I remembered myself when I woke up alone. I remember myself every time I look in the mirror and see a woman you have tried to erase." She turned to face the court. She held Theo up slightly, not high, just enough for them to see his face. The tiny nose, the closed eyes, the small hand curled into a fist. "This is Theo," she said, "heir to the throne, my son. And I will raise him to know that a king's power means nothing without a king's heart." She looked back at Thomas. "You may have chosen his godmother. You may have chosen his nursery. You may have chosen his name. But I chose to carry him. I chose to bleed for him. I chose to live when your physician told you I might not. And every day, Thomas, I will choose him. The question is, what will you choose?" The silence that followed was absolute. Thomas stared at her. His face was still stone, but something moved behind his eyes. Something fast and dark, like a storm cloud passing over a mountain. His hands, hanging at his sides, curled into fists. The air in the room grew thick and heavy with the weight of his wolf pressing against his control. "You speak of choices," he said finally. "You had a choice, Maltida. You could have refused the moon ceremony. You could have rejected the bond. You did not. You came to this castle. You accepted this life. Do not blame me for the cage you walked into willingly." Maltida felt those words like physical blows. Each one landed somewhere soft. Each one left a bruise. But she had been bleeding for 3 weeks. She had died on a table. She had held her son in the dark and promised him she would never break. She would not break now. "You're right," she said. "I walked into this cage. And for a long time I told myself that if I was patient enough, quiet enough, obedient enough, you would open the door. But you won't, will you? Because you like the cage, Thomas. You like that I am trapped. You like that I cannot leave. It makes you feel powerful." She took a step toward him. Just one. Close enough to see the fine lines around his eyes, the tension in his jaw, the way his chest rose and fell too quickly. "But power is not love," she whispered. "And one day you will understand the difference. I just hope it is not too late." She did not wait for an answer. She turned, Theo still pressed against her chest, and walked toward the door. The court parted for her like water before a stone. No one spoke. No one stopped her. At the threshold, she paused. She looked back over her shoulder, not at Thomas, but at the blonde woman, Lady Vera, the advisor. "Enjoy the nursery," Maltida said. "I hope the bars are to your liking." Then she walked out, and she did not look back again. In the small, cold room that had been assigned to her, not the Luna's chambers, which remained empty and locked, but a servant's quarters near the kitchens, Maltida sat on a thin mattress and held her son. The room was barely large enough for the bed, a washstand, and a small wooden trunk. The walls were bare stone, damp to the touch. A single candle flickered on the windowsill, fighting against the draft. But it was hers. No one had decorated it without her permission. No one had filled it with iron cribs and battle scenes. Gracie found her there an hour later, weeping silently into the pup's swaddle. "My Luna," Gracie whispered, kneeling beside her. "What happened? What did he say to you?" Maltida lifted her head. Her eyes were red but dry now. There was something new in them, something that looked like steel, all like a blade being forged in the hottest fire. "He does not love me," she said, "and I have stopped hoping he ever will. But he will learn to respect me, Gracie, because I am going to become something he cannot ignore." She looked down at Theo, who had fallen asleep with his tiny mouth open, his breath warm against her collarbone. His small hand was wrapped around her finger, holding on with a grip that was surprisingly strong for a creature so small. "Tomorrow," she said, "I am going to write to every allied pack, every Luna, every she-wolf who has ever been treated as less than a warrior. I am going to build something of my own, a network, an alliance, a power he cannot touch because it exists in the spaces he has forgotten." Gracie's eyes widened. The king will not allow it. He will see it as a threat. As rebellion. Maltida smiled. It was not a kind smile. It was the smile of a woman who had died on a birthing table and come back with nothing left to lose. It was the smile of someone who had already lost everything that mattered, except one small breathing thing in her arms. "Then the king," she said softly, "will have to stop me. And we both know, Gracie, that he does not care enough to try." She blew out the candle. In the darkness, with Theo's soft breathing filling the silence, she began to plan. Outside, the wind howled against the castle walls. Winter was coming. But Maltida had survived worse than winter. She had survived the Alpha King. The first letter took her 3 hours to write. Maltida sat on the thin mattress with Theo asleep in a makeshift bassinet beside her, a wooden drawer lined with wool, the only thing Gracie had been able to find. The candle had burned down to a stub, then replaced, then burned down again. Her hand cramped around the quill. The ink smudged in the damp cold, but she did not stop. "To the Luna of the Silver Creek Pack, you do not know me. I am Maltida, Luna of the Eastern Realm, and mate to Alpha King Thomas. I write to you not as a queen, but as a woman who has nearly died bringing a pup into a world that does not value the mothers who create it. I write to ask a question. Who speaks for us? When the Alphas gather for their councils, we are not there. When the borders are drawn and the treaties are signed, our voices are not heard. When a she-wolf bleeds out on a birthing table, her mate is asked to choose, her life or the pup's, and no one asks her what she wants. I nearly died 3 weeks ago. My husband, the Alpha King, chose our pup. He walked out of the room while my heart was still fighting to beat. I am writing to you because I believe we can be more than wives, more than mothers, more than the soft shadows behind the throne. I believe we can build something together. A network of Lunas and she-wolves who refuse to be invisible. If this letter reaches you, and if you wish to reply, send your answer with a trusted servant. Address it to Gracie, in the kitchens. No one reads the kitchen post. We have nothing to lose but our silence. Maltida. She read it twice. Then she folded it, sealed it with a drop of wax from the candle, and handed it to Gracie. Send this to every pack within 3 days' ride, she said. And Gracie, tell no one. Not the guards, not the other servants, not even Lionel. Gracie's hands trembled as she took the letter. My Luna, if the king finds out. He won't, Maltida said. Because he never looks at me, and he never looks at you. That is our greatest weapon, Gracie. We are invisible to him. Let's use it. 3 days passed, then 5, then 7. Maltida healed slowly. Each day she walked a little farther. Each night she held Theo a little tighter. She ate everything Gracie brought her. Thick stews, dark bread, dried meat, until her cheeks filled out and the bruises under her eyes faded to a pale gray instead of black. She did not see Thomas. She heard him, sometimes, his voice echoing through the stone halls. his boots pounding past her door at odd hours. Once, she heard Vera's laugh, that soft, musical sound, floating down from the royal wing. Maltida sat on her mattress, Theo at her breast, and felt nothing. That was a lie. She felt something, but it was not jealousy. It was not heartbreak. It was something colder, sharper. A blade being honed. Let him have his advisor, she thought. Let him have his war councils and his iron cribs. I have something he will never understand. I have a future he cannot see. On the 8th day, the first reply came. Gracie burst into the room at dawn, her apron covered in flour, her eyes wide. In her hand was a small folded parchment sealed with blue wax, the mark of the Silver Creek pack. She wrote back, Gracie whispered. The Luna of Silver Creek. She wrote back. Maltida's heart pounded as she broke the seal. Luna Maltida, you are not alone. I have felt every word of your letter in my own bones. 3 years ago, I lost a pup. The labor was long. The pup was stillborn. My mate, Alpha Rurik, did not hold my hand. He was at the border, fighting a war that could have waited. I have never told anyone that. I did not know I was waiting for someone to ask. Yes, I will join you. Tell me what to do. Luna Alara of Silver Creek Maltida read the letter 3 times. Then she pressed it to her chest, closed her eyes, and let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding for 8 days. 1, she said softly. We have 1. By the end of the 2nd week, she had 7. 7 Lunas. 7 packs. 7 women who had been ignored, dismissed, and pushed aside in favor of wars and borders and the endless, exhausting business of men. Their letters arrived in pieces, some angry, some trembling, some so full of grief that Maltida had to set them down and walk to the window to breathe. One Luna wrote of her mate's mistress, installed in the pack house like a second wife. Another wrote of the way her opinions were dismissed in council meetings, her wolf's wisdom treated as female nonsense. A third, old, nearly 60, her pups grown, wrote simply, I have been silent for 40 years. I do not know how to speak anymore, but I will try for you. Maltida wrote back to every single one. She wrote through the night, Theo sleeping in the drawer beside her, the candle burning low. She wrote until her fingers bled and her eyes blurred. She wrote because if she stopped writing, she would have to think about Thomas, about Vera, about the cold, empty bed in the royal wing that had never once held both of them at the same time. We are not asking for war, she wrote in a circular letter sent to all 7. We are asking for a seat at the table. We are asking to be heard. We are asking that no she-wolf ever die alone on a birthing table, while her mate chooses a pup over her without even asking her name. We will call ourselves the Circle of Silent Moons. Because we have been silent. Because the moon sees us, even when our mates do not. Our first meeting will be in 1 month. I will find a place. I will send word. But secrets have weight, and the heavier they become, the harder they are to hide. It was Lionel who noticed first. He came to check Maltida's stitches on the 18th day. A formality now, the wound healed to a thin silver scar that ran across her lower belly like a question mark. He was quiet, efficient, as always. But as he packed his instruments, his eyes fell on the stack of letters hidden beneath Theo's blanket in the drawer. He said nothing. He did not reach for them, but Maltida saw the way his gaze lingered. Lionel, she said. He looked at her. His face was unreadable. Lionel, she repeated softer. You have been kind to me. More kind than most. But if you tell him, I am the king's physician, he said, not his spy. That is not an answer. He was silent for a long moment. Then he reached into his coat and pulled out a small glass vial filled with a pale blue liquid. He set it on the table beside her bed. "For the pain," he said, "when it returns. And it will return, my Luna. The body remembers what the heart tries to forget." He walked to the door, paused, did not turn around. "I see nothing," he said quietly. "I have been blind for 40 years. A few more weeks will not matter." Then he was gone. Maltida picked up the vial. She turned it over in her fingers, watching the blue liquid catch the light. A gift, or a warning. She wasn't sure which. She hid it beneath the mattress, next to the letters. It was Vera who found her, not the letters, not yet, but her. It happened on the 23rd day. Maltida had finally grown strong enough to leave her room, to walk the corridors with Theo strapped to her chest in a sling Gracie had sewn from an old sheet. She walked slowly, carefully, one hand on the wall for balance. She wanted to see the Eastern Tower. There was a small, undisused room there, a former library, she had been told, that might serve as a meeting place for the circle. She was halfway up the spiral stairs when she heard the footsteps behind her. Maltida. That voice. Smooth as silk, cold as river water in winter. Maltida turned. Vera stood 3 steps below her, dressed in a gown of deep purple, her blonde hair braided like a crown around her head. She was beautiful. Maltida had known that the first time she saw her. But up close, in the narrow stairwell, that beauty felt like a weapon. "Lady Vera," Maltida said, "you are far from the nursery." Vera smiled. It did not reach her eyes. "And you are far from your room. The king would be concerned if he knew you were wandering alone." "The king," Maltida said, "would not notice if I wandered off a cliff." Something flickered across Vera's face. Surprise, perhaps. Or respect. It was gone before Maltida could name it. "Probably not," Vera agreed. She climbed 2 steps closer. Close enough that Maltida could smell her perfume. Jasmine and something darker. Something like ambition. "But I would notice. And I am here to give you some advice, Luna, to almost Luna." "Almost?" Vera tilted her head. "You are the mother of the heir. That gives you status. But status is not power. Power is being in the room when decisions are made. Power is standing beside the king when the sun rises. Power is something you have never had, Maltida, and something you will never have, as long as you hide in your servants' quarters and write your little letters." Maltida's blood went cold. She knows. How does she know? But Vera's next words eased her fear. Only slightly. "I don't know what you're doing," Vera said, as if reading her thoughts. "But I know you're doing something. A woman does not survive what you survived, and then simply fade away. So here is my advice. Whatever you are planning, stop. Thomas does not forgive betrayal, and he will see any move you make, any reach for power, as betrayal." Maltida held Theo closer to her chest. The pup stirred, let out a small sigh, and settled again. "And what do you see it as?" Maltida asked. Vera was quiet for a moment. Then she laughed, that soft, musical sound, and shook her head. "I see it as foolish," she said. "You could have everything, Maltida. You are his mate. The moon chose you, not me. You. But instead of learning to play the game, you are hiding in the shadows, nursing your wounds and your grudges. That is not how you win." "I am not trying to win," Maltida said. "Then what are you trying to do?" Maltida looked down at Theo, at his tiny nose, his closed eyes, the small hand curled against her chest. Then she looked back at Vera. "I am trying to survive," she said. "And I am trying to make sure my son grows up in a world where his mother's life matters. Not just his." She turned and continued up the stairs. She did not look back, but Vera's voice followed her, soft and certain. "You cannot survive alone, Maltida. And the friends you are gathering, the Lunas with their sad letters and their broken hearts, they cannot protect you. When the storm comes, and it will come, you will wish you had stood beside the king instead of against him. Maltida reached the top of the stairs. She paused with her hand on the door to the old library. Lady Vera," she said without turning around. "I have already stood beside the king. I stood beside him on our mating night. I stood beside him when I told him I was pregnant. I stood beside him on the birthing table while he chose our son over me." She pushed open the door. "He was not beside me. He has never been beside me. So forgive me if I no longer care about standing beside a man who left me to die." She walked into the library, and she closed the door behind her. The room was small, dusty, forgotten. Bookshelves lined the walls, their contents crumbling with age. A single window faced east, toward the mountains. Moonlight spilled through the glass, silver and cold. Maltida stood in the center of the room and turned in a slow circle. "This is it," she thought. "This is where we will meet. This is where we will build something new." She pressed her forehead against the cold glass and closed her eyes. 7, she whispered. "We have 7. By the time the moon is full again, we will have more." Theo shifted in the sling, his small mouth finding her collarbone, seeking warmth. She cupped the back of his head with her palm and held him close. Outside, the wind howled. Winter was here. But Maltida was no longer afraid of the cold. The first meeting of the Circle of Silent Moons took place on a night when the castle slept. Maltida had chosen the date carefully. The night of the new moon, when even the guards' wolves grew sluggish and the corridors were darkest. She had sent word through Gracie, who had enlisted 3 kitchen maids, 2 stable boys, and an elderly guard named Oren who owed Lionel a debt and asked no questions. By midnight, they began to arrive. Luna Alara of Silver Creek came first, wrapped in a hooded cloak of deep brown, her face pale and determined. She was older than Maltida by 10 years, with streaks of gray in her dark hair, and a quiet strength in the way she held herself. She embraced Maltida without hesitation, a warm, fierce hug that smelled of pine and wood smoke. "I thought I was the only one," Alara whispered against Maltida's shoulder. "I thought I was alone." "You are not alone," Maltida said. "None of us are. Not anymore." The others came in 1s and 2s. Luna Bryn of Stonehold, young and sharp-eyed, her pregnant belly round beneath her cloak. Luna Mari of Westfall, ancient and bent, leaning on a carved wooden staff, or her wolf so old it only surfaced in her dreams. Luna Sarah of Redwater, whose mate had struck her so hard last winter that she had lost hearing in her left ear. Luna Finola of Highcliffe, who had not spoken a word in council in 12 years, though her letters to Maltida had been long and fierce. Luna Daria of Blackpine, whose mate had taken a mistress and moved her into the pack house, forcing Daria to share a roof with the woman who was slowly replacing her. And Luna Rosalind of Dawnfield, the youngest of them all, barely 19, mated just a year, already showing signs of the same bruises Maltida had seen in her own mirror. 7 women, 7 stories, 7 different kinds of pain. They gathered in the old library, sitting on dusty cushions Gracie had smuggled up the stairs. A single lantern burned in the center of the circle, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Theo slept in his drawer bassinet in the corner, tucked beneath a wool blanket, his small chest rising and falling. Maltida stood in the center of the circle. She looked at each woman in turn. She let herself feel the weight of what they were doing, the danger, the risk, the sheer impossibility of 7 Lunas meeting in secret beneath the nose of the Alpha King. "I am not a leader," Maltida began. "I am a woman who almost died. I am a woman whose mate chose a pup over her without a second thought. I am a woman who woke up in a cold room and realized that no one was coming to save me. She paused. Her voice did not shake. So I decided to save myself. And I decided that if I was going to survive, I was not going to survive alone. Luna Alara nodded. Tell us what you need. I need us to become something the Alphas cannot ignore, Maltida said. I need us to share information about pack movements, about treaties, about anything that affects our territories. I need us to protect each other. If one of us is in danger, the rest ride. No questions, no hesitation. Luna Bryn, the pregnant one, frowned. That sounds like a rebellion. Maltida shook her head. It sounds like a mutual aid society. The Alphas have their war councils. We have this. We are not trying to overthrow anyone. We are trying to survive. And if the king finds out? Luna Sarah asked quietly, touching her bad ear. What happens to us then? Maltida looked at her. At all of them. Then we face it together, she said. But he will not find out. Because he does not see us. None of them do. That is our strength. We are the furniture of their lives, the wallpaper. The silent, dutiful wives who smile and nod and disappear when the real business begins. She smiled. It was not a kind smile. Let them keep not seeing us. By the time they look up, we will be everywhere. For 2 hours they talked. They shared secrets they had never told anyone, of miscarriages hidden from their mates, of debts owed to merchants who would not deal with women, of children who had been taken from them and given to nannies and nursemaids because the Luna has duties elsewhere. Luna Mari, the ancient one, spoke last. Her voice was thin as parchment, but her eyes were bright. I have outlived 2 mates, she said. The first was cruel. The second was kind, but weak. I learned that a she-wolf's power does not come from her mate. It comes from the other she-wolves around her. I have been alone for 20 years since my second mate died. I did not know I was lonely until tonight. She reached across the circle and took Maltida's hand. Her fingers were cold and bony, but her grip was strong. You are doing the right thing, child. The moon sees you, and the moon does not forget. Maltida squeezed her hand. Neither do I. It was nearly dawn when the last Luna left. Maltida stood at the window, watching them disappear into the gray pre-dawn light. Hooded figures slipping through the castle gates, melting into the forest like ghosts. Gracie had already gone to the kitchens to start the fires and create an alibi. Theo was awake now, blinking up at the ceiling, his small mouth opening and closing like a baby bird. Maltida lifted him from the drawer and held him to her chest. Your mother is a revolutionary, she whispered to him. Or a fool. Or both. But whatever happens, little one, I am doing this for you. Theo yawned. He did not seem impressed. She laughed. A real laugh. The first one in months. It felt strange in her throat, like waking a sleeping muscle. But the cracks in the throne were already spreading. Thomas noticed nothing. He was too busy with his wars, his borders, his endless councils. But Lionel noticed. The old physician had seen the extra footsteps in the dust outside the library. He had smelled the mingled scents of 7 different she-wolves on Maltida's clothes. He had said nothing, but his silence had grown heavier. And Vera noticed. The king's advisor had eyes everywhere. Servants reported to her. Guards whispered in her ear. She knew about the kitchen maids who had taken extra bread on the night of the new moon. She knew about the stable boys who had saddled horses for riders who never arrived. She knew about the elderly guard, Orin, who had looked the other way. She did not tell Thomas. Not yet. Instead, she came to Maltida's room 3 days after the meeting. Maltida was feeding Theo when the knock came. She had expected Gracie, or perhaps Lionel with his weekly check. She did not expect Vera to step through the door without waiting for an answer, her purple gown sweeping across the stone floor. You knocked, Maltida said dryly. I'm impressed. Vera closed the door behind her. She leaned against it, arms crossed, her green eyes sweeping the room. The drawer bassinet, the stack of letters hidden beneath a loose floorboard, and the small glass vial Lionel had given her still tucked beneath the mattress. 7, Vera said. I count 7 cents on your clothes. 7 different packs. 7 lunas, if I had to guess. Maltida's heart stuttered, but her face remained calm. I don't know what you're talking about. You are a terrible liar, Vera said. But a brave one. I'll give you that. She pushed off from the door and walked to the window. The morning light caught her blonde hair, turned it to gold. She looked, Maltida thought, like a painting. A beautiful, dangerous painting. I am not going to tell him, Vera said. Maltida stared at her. Why not? Vera was silent for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was different, softer, stripped of its usual silk. Because I know what it is like to be invisible, she said. You think I am his mistress, his bed warmer, his pretty, useless advisor. And maybe I am. But I am also a woman who has no mate, no pack of my own. No one who would mourn me if I disappeared tomorrow. She turned from the window. Her eyes met Maltida's. I am not your enemy, Maltida. I am not your friend either. But I am not your enemy. Then what are you? Vera smiled. It was a sad smile, smaller than her usual ones. I am a woman who is watching to see what you become. The king thinks you are broken. He thinks you will fade away, like all the others. But I have been watching you, and I do not think you will fade. She walked to the door, paused with her hand on the latch. Be careful, she said. The king has enemies you do not know about. And if they discover what you are building, they will not try to stop you. They will try to use you. She opened the door. And then they will destroy you. She was gone before Maltida could respond. That night, Maltida could not sleep. She lay on the thin mattress, Theo beside her in the drawer, and stared at the ceiling. Vera's words echoed in her head. They will try to use you, and then they will destroy you. She thought about Thomas, about the cold look in his eyes when he had chosen the pup over her, about the way he had not visited her once in 4 weeks, about Vera's perfume on his collar, Vera's laugh in his corridors, Vera's hand on his arm during court. She thought about the circle, about Alara's fierce hug, Mari's bony fingers, Bryn's pregnant belly, about the letters hidden beneath the floorboard, each one a small act of rebellion. She thought about Theo, his small hand curled around her finger, his breath warm against her neck, his entire future resting on her shoulders. I will not fail you, she promised him silently. I will not let them break me. I will not let them take you. Outside, the wind howled. Somewhere in the castle, a door slammed. Footsteps echoed, heavy, deliberate. The king's footsteps, walking away from her room, as he always did. Maltida closed her eyes. She did not sleep, but she did not cry either. She was done crying. In the royal wing, in his cold, empty chamber, Thomas sat alone. The fire had burned down to embers. A half-empty glass of wine sat on the table beside him. He had been staring at the flames for hours, but he had not seen them. He had seen Maltida, her hollow cheeks, her gray dress, the way she had looked at him in the nursery, not with anger, and not with despair, but with something worse. Indifference. She had stopped hoping. He had felt it like a blade between his ribs. He picked up the wine glass. He set it down without drinking. She is the mother of my heir, he told himself. I have done my duty. I have protected the bloodline. That is enough. But even as he thought it, he knew it was a lie. The moon had chosen her for him. The bond hummed in his chest, a low, constant ache that he had been ignoring for months. He had told himself that duty came first, that love was a weakness, that he did not need her. But alone in the dark, with the fire dying and the wind howling, he felt the truth. He was the Alpha King, the most powerful wolf in the realm, and he was utterly, completely alone. He closed his eyes. He did not sleep either. 3 months passed. The winter deepened, burying the castle in snow so thick that the world beyond the walls ceased to exist. The wolves grew restless, their beasts stirring beneath their skin, hungry for the spring that seemed impossibly far away. Inside the castle, the air grew thick with tension, the particular crackling tension of too many predators trapped in too small a space. Maltida used every moment. While the castle slept, she built. The circle of silent moons grew from 7 lunas to 12, then to 18. She received letters from packs she had never heard of, small, forgotten territories in the far north. Mountain packs so remote, they saw the king's tax collectors once a year, if at all. Each letter was a thread. She wove them together, slowly, carefully, into a tapestry of quiet rebellion. She learned things, important things. She learned that 3 packs on the eastern border were planning to secede from the king's rule, tired of paying tribute to a crown that offered them nothing in return. She learned that the king's own generals were divided, half loyal to Thomas, half whispering about a younger, stronger alpha who might lead them better. She learned that Vera had been right. Thomas had enemies she did not know about, and they were circling. She did not share this information with Thomas. He had not earned it. Instead, she shared it with the Circle. And the Circle shared it with their packs. And slowly, quietly, the balance of power began to shift. Theo grew. He was a good pup, calm, curious, with his mother's dark eyes and his father's stubborn jaw. He smiled at 3 months, rolled over at 4, and sat up on his own at 5. Maltida watched every milestone with fierce, desperate joy. He was the only good thing in her life, the only warmth in her cold stone room. Thomas had still not visited. He had seen the pup, of course, at official functions, at the mandatory heir presentations that occurred every full moon. He would hold Theo for exactly 5 minutes, his massive hands surprisingly gentle, his face unreadable. Then he would hand the pup back to a nurse, never to Maltida, and walk away. He had not spoken to Maltida since the night in the nursery. Not a word, not a glance. She had become a ghost in her own life, a rumor rather than a person. She told herself she didn't care. She was lying. It was Lionel who broke the silence. He came to her room on a night in late winter, his face grayer than usual, his hands trembling slightly. He did not knock. He simply opened the door and stood there, looking at her with an expression she had never seen before. Fear. "My Luna," he said, "you need to leave." Maltida set Theo down in his drawer. He was too big for it now, his feet hanging over the edge, but she had nowhere else to put him. She stood slowly, her hand reaching for the small knife she kept hidden in her sleeve. What happened? Lionel closed the door behind him. He leaned against it, as if holding it shut against an army. "The king knows," he said, "about the Circle, about the letters, about everything." Maltida's blood turned to ice. "How?" "I don't know. Someone talked. A servant. A guard. One of the Lunas, perhaps. Betrayed under threat or torture. It doesn't matter. What matters is that he knows, and he is coming." "When?" Lionel looked at her. His eyes were ancient, weary, full of a grief that had nothing to do with medicine. "Now," he said. "He is on his way now." Maltida had 30 seconds. She used them. She grabbed Theo from the drawer and strapped him to her chest in the sling. She grabbed the letters from beneath the floorboard. All of them. dozens of them, months of secrets, and shoved them into the fire. She watched them burn, the flames catching the edges, the ink curling and disappearing. She grabbed the small glass vial Lionel had given her, the pale blue liquid, and tucked it into her pocket. She looked at Lionel. Go. If he finds you here, he will know you warned me. Lionel shook his head. I am old, my Luna. I have lived long enough. I will not run. Lionel! The door exploded inward. Thomas stood in the doorway, and he was not the cold, controlled king she had seen at court. He was something else, something ancient and terrible. His eyes glowed gold. His wolf was at the surface, barely contained. His hands were claws. His chest heaved with the effort of holding back the shift. Behind him in the corridor, Maltida saw Vera. The advisor's face was pale, her green eyes wide. She looked almost as frightened as Maltida felt. Leave us, Thomas growled. The command was not directed at Maltida. Lionel did not move. I said leave. Lionel bowed his head. He walked past Thomas, pausing for just a moment to meet Maltida's eyes. I am sorry, he mouthed. Then he was gone. Vera was gone. The door slammed shut. Maltida and Thomas were alone. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The fire crackled. Theo stirred in the sling, let out a small, questioning sound, and then settled again. Maltida kept her hand on the knife in her sleeve. She knew it would not stop him. Nothing would stop him if he truly decided to hurt her. But she would not go quietly. The circle of silent moons, Thomas said. His voice was low, ragged, nothing like the cold, formal tone she was used to. 18 lunas. Letters sent to every pack in the realm. Plans to undermine my authority. To build a shadow government beneath my nose. Maltida said nothing. Did you think I would not find out? He took a step toward her. The floorboards creaked beneath his weight. Did you think I was blind? I thought you didn't care, Maltida said. Her voice was steady, though her heart was pounding. You have ignored me for 8 months, Thomas. You left me to die on a birthing table. You have not spoken to me in 3 months. Why would you care about letters? Thomas's jaw tightened. His claws extended further, scraping against his own palms. Blood dripped onto the stone floor. You are my mate, he said. Everything you do reflects on me. Every letter you write, every alliance you build, it is treason. Do you understand that? I could have you executed for what you have done. Maltida felt something snap inside her. Then do it, she said. Thomas froze. Go ahead, she continued, stepping toward him. Her hand left the knife. She had no need for it now. She had something sharper. Execute me. Kill the mother of your son. Kill the woman the moon chose for you. Kill me, Thomas, and see if your crown feels heavier or lighter. You think I won't? I think you are a coward, she said. I think you have spent 8 months hiding behind your wars and your councils and your advisor because you are too afraid to look at me. Too afraid to see what you have done. Too afraid to admit that you were wrong. Thomas's wolf surged. He was in her face in an instant, his hand around her throat. Not squeezing, not yet, but there. His golden eyes burned into hers. I am the Alpha King, he snarled. I am never wrong. Maltida did not flinch. She looked at him, really looked at him, and saw what she had been too blind to see before. The exhaustion, the loneliness, the fear. You are a man, she said quietly. A man who was given a crown and told that power was everything. A man who was never taught how to love. A man who is so terrified of being weak that he has made himself cruel. His hand tightened. Just a fraction. Theo, she said. Look at him. Thomas's eyes flickered to the sling. to the small, dark-haired pup sleeping against Maltida's chest. Theo's face was peaceful, utterly unaware that his father's hand was around his mother's throat. "He has your jaw," Maltida whispered. "And my eyes. He laughs when I sing to him. He cries when I leave the room. He is half you and half me, and he deserves better than a father who cannot look at his mother without seeing an enemy." Thomas's hand began to shake. "He deserves better," Maltida continued, "than a king who chooses a pup over his mate and then walks away. He deserves better than a man who lets his advisor whisper poison in his ear while his wife bleeds alone in the dark." "I did not know," Thomas started. "You did not ask." Maltida cut him off. "You never ask. You never look. You never see. I have been dying in front of you for 8 months, Thomas, and you have walked past my door every single night without knocking." Tears burned in her eyes. She hated them. She hated that he was seeing them. "But I am not dying anymore," she said. "I am not the woman who bled on that table. I am not the woman who waited for you to love her. I am something else now, something you cannot control." She reached up and wrapped her fingers around his wrist. His hand was still at her throat. His pulse pounded against her palm. "So execute me," she said, "or step aside. But do not stand there and pretend that I am the traitor. You betrayed me first. You betrayed me the moment you walked out of that infirmary without looking back." The silence stretched between them, vast and terrible. Then Thomas's hand fell away. He stepped back. His claws retracted. The gold faded from his eyes, leaving behind something raw and wounded and utterly lost. He looked at her. He looked at Theo. He looked at the burned letters in the fireplace, the ashes of her rebellion still smoking. "I did not know," he said again, but this time it sounded less like an excuse and more like a confession. "You know now," Maltida said. Thomas turned. He walked to the door. He opened it. "Thomas." He paused, did not turn around. "The circle is not your enemy," Maltida said. "We are not trying to overthrow you. We are trying to survive you. There is a difference." He stood there for a long moment, his back to her, his shoulders heavy. Then he walked out. The door did not slam. It closed softly, almost gently, like a question waiting for an answer. Maltida sank onto the mattress. On her legs gave out. Her hands shook. Theo woke and began to cry, a thin, hungry wail that cut through the silence. She unstrapped the sling and brought him to her breast. He latched on, hungry and demanding, his small fists pressing against her skin. "I'm here," she whispered. "I'm still here. We're still here." She looked at the closed door. She did not know what would happen next. She did not know if Thomas would come back. She did not know if the circle would survive. She did not know if she would wake up tomorrow in a cell or a coffin, or the same cold room she had called home for 8 months. But she knew one thing. She had looked the Alpha King in the eye and told him the truth. And he had let go. In the corridor, Thomas walked. He did not know where he was going. His feet carried him past the nursery, the iron crib, on the battle-scarred walls, the velvet curtains the color of dried blood. He stopped outside the door. He had not been here since the night of the presentation. He had paid someone else to bring Theo for the official viewings. He had told himself it was because he was busy, because he was the king, because he had more important things to do than sit in a nursery. But standing here now, in the dark, he knew the truth. He had been afraid. Afraid of the small, fragile thing in the crib. Afraid of the way it made him feel. Vulnerable. Uncertain. Human. Afraid of the woman who had given birth to it, who looked at him with eyes that saw straight through his crown and into the hollow, lonely thing beneath. He pushed open the nursery door. The room was empty. Cold. The iron crib gleamed in the moonlight, its bars casting long shadows on the floor. He walked to the corner. He knelt. The cradle Maltida had carved was still there, covered in dust. He ran his fingers over the little wolves she had shaped, the tiny silver hearts she had painted on their chests. She had made this with her own hands, while he was in his war councils, while he was ignoring her, while she was hoping he might one day love her. Thomas bowed his head. For the first time in 20 years, since the night his father died and the crown was forced upon him, the Alpha King wept. Thomas came back at dawn. Maltida was sitting by the window, Theo asleep in her arms, watching the snow turn pink with the rising sun. She had not slept. She had spent the night waiting, not for him, she told herself, but for whatever came next. An arrest, an execution, a lifetime in the dungeons. She had not expected him to knock. 3 soft raps on the wooden door. Not the commanding pound of a king. The hesitant knock of a man who was not sure he was welcome. "Come in," she said. Thomas opened the door. He looked terrible. His eyes red-rimmed, his tunic rumpled, his hair disheveled as if he had been running his hands through it all night. The crown was gone. For the first time since she had met him, he was not wearing it. He looked, Maltida thought, almost human. "I owe you an apology," he said. Maltida said nothing. She waited. Thomas stepped into the room. He did not sit. He stood in the center of the small space, his massive frame making the walls feel closer, the ceiling lower. But for once, he did not seem to be trying to dominate the room. He seemed lost. "I have been a coward," he said. "Not just since the birth. Since the beginning. Since the moon ceremony. I saw you across that clearing, and I felt the bond snap into place, and I was terrified." "Terrified?" Maltida's voice was flat. "Of what?" "Of needing someone." He looked at her then. Really looked, the way she had begged him to look for 8 months. "My father was a cruel man. He told me that love was weakness, that the only thing a king could trust was power. I believed him. I believed him for so long that I forgot how to feel anything else." "You felt something," Maltida said quietly. "You felt enough to take me to your bed, enough to put a pup in my belly, enough to choose him over me." Thomas flinched. "That was not a choice. That was... I don't know what that was. Panic. Fear. I was so afraid of losing my heir that I forgot I could lose you." "You did lose me," Maltida said. "I died on that table, Thomas. Lionel brought me back. But the woman you mated? She died. And I am what is left." Thomas knelt. It was such a small thing, a king kneeling on cold stone, but it cracked something open in Maltida's chest. She had imagined this moment so many times. Him begging, her forgiving. A happy ending wrapped in a bow. But this was not that. "I am not asking for forgiveness," he said. "I am not asking you to forget what I did. I am asking for a chance. Not to be your king. Not to be your mate. Just a chance to know my son. And to know you. The real you. The one I have been too afraid to see." Maltida looked down at Theo. The pup had opened his eyes. He was staring at his father with that solemn, curious gaze that made him look so much older than his months. "He deserves a father," Maltida said. "But he will not have one who treats his mother like a ghost." "No," Thomas agreed. "He will not. Because I am going to change. I do not know how. I do not know if I can. But I am going to try." Maltida was silent for a long time. Then she stood. She walked to Thomas, still kneeling, still waiting, and she held Theo out to him. "Hold your son," she said. Thomas's hands trembled as he took the pup. His massive palms cradled Theo's tiny body with a gentleness that made Maltida's throat tighten. Theo blinked up at him. Then, slowly, the pup smiled. Thomas's breath caught. A tear slipped down his cheek. "What is his name?" Thomas asked. "His real name, not the one I gave him." Maltida knelt in front of him. She reached out and touched Theo's small hand. "Theo," she said. "I called him Theo, in my head, when I thought I was dying. It means gift from the moon." Thomas looked at her. His eyes were wet, raw, nothing like the cold king she had married. "Theo," he repeated. "It suits him better than Kale." "Kale means slayer," Maltida said. "He is a baby. He does not need to slay anything." A broken laugh escaped Thomas's throat. It was the first time she had ever heard him laugh. It was not a kind laugh. It was too jagged for that. But it was real. "What do we do now?" he asked. Maltida looked at him, at the man who had ignored her, the man who had chosen a pup over her, the man who was kneeling on her floor, holding her son, asking her a question he had never asked before. She thought about the circle, about the letters, about the women who were counting on her. She thought about Vera, watching from the shadows, waiting to see what she would become. She thought about Lionel, old and tired and braver than any general. She thought about the moon, who had chosen them for each other for reasons neither of them understood. "I do not know," she said, "but we are going to figure it out together. Not because you are the king, not because I am your mate, because our son deserves better than we have given him, and because I am tired of being invisible." Thomas nodded. He looked down at Theo, who had fallen back asleep in his father's arms, utterly trusting. "I see you," Thomas said quietly. "I know it is too late. I know I do not deserve it, but I see you, Maltida, and I will spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of that." Maltida did not say, "I forgive you." She did not say, "I love you." She said something truer. "Then start now." Epilogue. 6 months later. The nursery had changed again. The dark oak paneling was gone. The iron crib had been donated to the armory where it belonged. The velvet curtains had been torn down and burned. In their place were cream walls, soft curtains with little wolves sewn into them, and a wooden cradle carved by a mother's hands. Sunlight poured through the window. Theo, 8 months old, crawling, determined, chased a beam of light across the floor while Gracie laughed and clapped. Maltida sat in a chair by the window, a stack of letters in her lap. The circle of silent moons had grown to 42 lunas. They met once a month now, openly, and in a hall that Thomas had given them. He had not attended any of their meetings, but he had stopped pretending they did not exist. Vera had apologized. It had been awkward, stilted, and utterly sincere. She was still the king's advisor, but she no longer stood quite so close to him at court. Lionel had been promoted. He was no longer just the king's physician. He was the royal healer for the entire castle, with 3 apprentices and a proper infirmary. He visited Theo every week, bringing strange-smelling tonics that Theo hated and Maltida secretly used. And Thomas? Thomas was trying. He came to the nursery every evening. He read to Theo from books of pack history, though Theo was more interested in eating the pages. He walked with Maltida in the gardens when the snow melted, their conversations awkward and halting and real, and he had not asked to share her bed. He had not asked for anything. He simply showed up, every day, without fail. It was not a happy ending. Maltida knew that. The scars on her belly were still there. The memory of the birthing table still visited her in nightmares. She did not know if she would ever truly trust him. She did not know if she would ever love him the way the moon had intended. But she was no longer invisible. And that, she decided, was enough for now. That evening, Thomas found her in the nursery. Theo was asleep in the cradle, his small chest rising and falling. Maltida was sitting on the floor beside him, her back against the wall, her eyes half closed. Thomas sat down beside her. Not close enough to touch, close enough to talk. "The circle is meeting tomorrow," he said, "on about the eastern border dispute." "I know." "Will you tell me what is decided?" Maltida opened her eyes. She looked at him. Really looked. The way she had learned to do over the past 6 months. "Are you asking as my king, or as my mate?" Thomas considered the question. His jaw worked. His hands rested on his knees, open, unclenched. "I am asking as a man who is trying," he said. "And as a father who wants his son to grow up in a world where his mother's voice matters." Maltida was quiet for a moment. Then she reached over and took his hand. It was a small thing, a hand, fingers intertwined. But it was the first time she had touched him willingly since the night Theo was conceived. Thomas's breath caught. His fingers tightened around hers. "I will tell you," she said. "Not everything, but enough. That is more than I deserve." "Probably," she agreed. A small smile tugged at her lips. "But deserving has nothing to do with it." Outside, the sun set over the castle. The snow had finally melted. Spring was coming, and in a small, warm nursery, the Alpha King held his mate's hand for the first time. It was not a happy ending. It was a beginning.